Marcus Johnson stood on his front porch and stared at the twisted metal remains of what used to be his mailbox. This was the fourth one this month, and he was getting tired of it. The morning sun cast long shadows across his ranch on the planet, New Montana, where he had hoped to live peacefully after 20 years of military service with the Earth Defense Force. The planet looked almost like old Earth, with rolling hills and wide-open spaces perfect for raising cattle and growing crops. Marcus had used his military savings to buy this land and build a small ranch house where he could finally rest. But peace seemed impossible when the Galactic Homeowners Association kept destroying his property. Marcus walked over to examine the wreckage. The metal was cut clean through with precision that only alien technology could achieve. Small burn marks showed where plasma cutters had sliced through the steel post. His neighbor Lisa Parker came walking over from her farm next door carrying a cup of coffee. "They got yours too," Lisa said, looking at the destroyed mailbox. "Mine went down yesterday around midnight. I heard the drones, but by the time I got outside, they were already flying away." Marcus picked up a piece of the mailbox and turned it over in his hands. The edges were still warm from the cutting tools. "This makes no sense. The mailbox met all their regulations. I checked the height, the materials, even the color scheme. Everything was exactly what their rules demanded." Lisa nodded and took a sip of her coffee. "Same here, but they keep finding new violations. Last week it was the mounting brackets. The week before that it was the reflection index of the metal. They are making up reasons as they go." The Galactic Homeowners Association had taken control of New Montana 3 years ago when the planet joined the galactic community. The organization was run by aliens called Zephyrians, who looked like tall, blue-skinned people with long, thin arms and legs. They claimed to maintain community standards across all civilized worlds, but Marcus was starting to think they had other plans. "Have you noticed they only target human properties?" Marcus asked, looking around at the other farms in the valley. "The Centauri settlement up the hill never has problems. Neither do the Andromedan traders in town." Lisa followed his gaze toward the alien settlements scattered across the landscape. "You are right. I never thought about it before, but yeah, it's always us humans getting the violations and fines." Marcus had been a military engineer before retiring to New Montana. His job in the Earth Defense Force was building fortifications that could withstand alien weapons and survive in hostile environments. He knew how to solve problems that seemed impossible, and this mailbox situation was starting to look like a puzzle that needed solving. "There has to be a pattern here," Marcus said, walking back toward his house. "Military engineering taught me that every attack has a weakness and every system has rules that can be used against it." Lisa followed him onto the porch. "What are you thinking?" "I am thinking the HOA is not just enforcing random rules. They want something specific, and they are using these violations to get it." Marcus opened his front door and gestured for Lisa to come inside. "Want some breakfast?" "While we figure this out." The inside of Marcus' house was simple but comfortable, with furniture he had built himself and pictures from his military days on the walls. Lisa sat at the kitchen table while Marcus started cooking eggs and bacon on an old-fashioned stove. "Tell me about your violations," Marcus said, cracking eggs into a pan. "Not just the mailbox stuff, but everything they have cited you for." Lisa pulled out a tablet and scrolled through her messages. "Let me see. Improper fence height, even though I measured it exactly to their specifications. Wrong type of roofing. Material, even though I used what they recommended. Unapproved landscaping, even though I planted native species. Oh, and my barn is apparently the wrong shade of red." Marcus flipped the bacon and thought about his own list of violations. Same pattern here. Every time I fix something to meet their rules, they find a new problem. It's like they do not want us to succeed. "But why?" Lisa asked. "What do they gain from harassing human settlers?" Marcus served breakfast and sat down across from her. "Land. Think about it. Every time someone gets enough violations, they have to pay massive fines or sell their property. And who do you think buys it?" Lisa stopped eating and stared at him. "The Zephyrians." "Exactly. I did some research. After the second mailbox incident, Kexathorian Prime, the local HOA director, has been buying up human properties for the last 2 years. always at below market prices from people who could not afford the violation fines. The pieces were starting to fit together. The random violations, the impossible standards, the constant harassment. It was all designed to force human settlers off their land so the Zephyrians could expand their territory. So what do we do about it? Lisa asked. Marcus looked out the window at the spot where his mailbox used to stand. We fight back, but not the way they expect. Military strategy is about finding your enemy weakness and exploiting it. The Zephyrians think they can bully us into leaving, but they do not understand humans very well. What do you mean? Humans are stubborn. When someone tries to push us around, we do not run away. We dig in deeper and find ways to make ourselves impossible to move. Marcus smiled for the first time since finding his destroyed mailbox. I have an idea, but I am going to need help. Lisa leaned forward, interested. What kind of help? The kind that requires calling in favors from my old military unit, and maybe breaking a few rules of our own. Marcus stood up and walked to a locked cabinet where he kept his old military equipment. The HOA wants to play games with regulations and violations. Fine. But they are about to learn that humans can play that game better than anyone. Marcus pulled out his old military communicator and started entering codes he had not used in years. It was time to contact his former squad mates and see if they were interested in helping a fellow veteran solve an impossible problem. The Zephyrians had made one critical mistake in their harassment campaign. They had assumed that humans would give up when faced with superior technology and bureaucratic pressure. But Marcus Johnson had spent 20 years learning how to turn impossible situations into victories. The war for his mailbox was about to begin. Marcus spent the next 3 days reading through HOA regulations until his eyes hurt. The documents were written in complicated legal language that seemed designed to confuse rather than inform. Every rule had exceptions, and every exception had sub-rules that contradicted the original regulation. It was like trying to solve a puzzle where someone kept changing the pieces. Lisa came by every morning to help him go through the paperwork. She had studied alien cultures in college before becoming a farmer, so she understood Zephyrian thinking better than most humans. Together they spread the documents across Marcus' dining room table and tried to make sense of the legal maze. Look, at this section about communication devices, Lisa said, pointing to a dense paragraph of text. It says that any structure used for essential communication purposes is exempt from standard aesthetic regulations. But then down here it says that exemptions only apply to structures approved by the regional authority. Marcus rubbed his temples, where a headache was forming. And who is the regional authority? Kexathorian Prime. The same guy who keeps destroying our mailboxes. The more they read, the clearer it became that the system was designed to be impossible to navigate. Every path forward led back to the same Zephyrian officials who were causing the problems in the first place. It was brilliant in an evil sort of way. Greg Martinez knocked on the front door around noon, carrying a box of sandwiches from his supply depot in town. Greg was a former military supply officer who had decided to stay on New Montana after his discharge. He ran the only store that sold earth food and human tools to the scattered farming communities. Heard you were having trouble with the Blue Boys, Greg said, setting the food on the table. Thought you might be hungry after all this reading. Marcus looked up from a particularly confusing section about property markers. They got your mailbox too, 3 times in 2 weeks. Plus, they cited me for having too many vehicles in my driveway, even though I only have 1 truck. Apparently, it is not the right color for the neighborhood aesthetic standards. Lisa unwrapped a sandwich and shook her head. This is getting ridiculous. How many human settlers are they harassing? Greg sat down and pulled out a notebook. I have been keeping track since people started complaining to me at the store. 23 properties have received violations in the past month, all human-owned. 0 alien properties cited for anything. The pattern was even worse than Marcus had thought. It was not just random harassment, it was a systematic campaign to drive humans off the planet. The Zephyrians were using their bureaucratic power to steal land without technically breaking any galactic laws. I did some research on Kexathorian Prime. Greg continued flipping through his notes. Turns out he has done this before on 3 other worlds. Always the same pattern. Take control of local housing authority, then use violations and fines to force out unwanted species. Very effective and completely legal under galactic regulations, Marcus felt his anger building but forced himself to stay calm. Getting mad would not solve the problem. He needed to think like an engineer and find the weakness in their system. What happened on those other worlds, Marcus asked. 2 of them gave up and relocated their human populations. The 3rd world fought back through the galactic courts, but the legal process took 15 years and bankrupted most of the human settlers. By the time they won the case, there were only a few hundred humans left on the planet. Lisa put down her sandwich and stared at Greg. 15 years. Zephyrians live. A lot longer than humans. They can afford to wait. Time is on their side in any legal battle. Marcus stood up and walked to the window where he could see the empty spot where his mailbox used to be. Fighting through the courts was not an option. He needed a solution that worked faster than the Zephyrian legal system. Tell me about Zephyrian psychology, Marcus said, turning back to Lisa. What motivates them? What scares them? Lisa thought for a moment before answering. Control and order. Everything in Zephyrian society has a proper place and function. They get very uncomfortable when faced with things they cannot categorize or control. That is why they hate human creativity and unpredictability. So if we could create something they could not control or remove, it would drive them crazy, Lisa finished. But what could we build that they could not destroy? Their technology is more advanced than ours. Marcus smiled for the first time in days. Not all technology is about being advanced. Sometimes the best solutions are simple ones that work in ways your enemy does not expect. He walked over to his military cabinet and pulled out his old service manual. The book was full of engineering techniques for building structures that could survive anything from plasma bombardment to gravitational weapons. Most of the technology was classified, but some of the basic principles could be adapted for civilian use. What are you thinking? Greg asked, looking at the military diagrams Marcus was studying. I am thinking about a story my drill sergeant used to tell about an ancient Earth general who won a war by building something his enemies could not knock down. The secret was not making it stronger than their weapons, but making it impossible to remove, even if they could damage it. Marcus found the section he was looking for and pointed to a diagram of something called quantum lock technology. This is experimental stuff that the Earth Defense Force was working on when I retired. The idea is to create molecular bonds between materials that are so strong they become part of the atomic structure of whatever they are attached to. Lisa leaned over to look at the diagram. You mean like gluing something to the planet itself? Better than glue. Quantum locks create actual atomic bonds. Once activated, the locked object becomes part of the molecular structure of whatever it is touching. You would have to destroy the entire planet to remove it. Greg whistled softly. That sounds expensive. Very expensive. Too expensive for mass production, which is why the military never used it widely. But for one mailbox, Marcus grinned. I think I know someone who might be able to help. Marcus walked back to his communications equipment and started entering a long series of security codes. The signal would be encrypted and bounce through several relay stations before reaching Earth. What he was about to ask for was technically against regulations, but he was hoping his old squad mates would understand the situation. Roy Bennett. Here, came a familiar voice through the static. Roy, it's Marcus Johnson. I need a favor. There was a pause before Roy answered. Marcus, you old dog. Heard you were farming on some frontier world. How is retirement treating you? Complicated. Listen, I need some technical assistance with a construction project. The kind that requires materials we used to work with in the old days. Another pause, longer this time. This is not a secure channel, Marcus. You want to be careful what you ask for. I understand. But Roy, there are people here who need help and the local authorities are not being reasonable. Sometimes you have to build something they cannot tear down. I see. And this would be a small project. Personal use only. 1 unit. Just enough to solve a very specific problem. Roy was quiet for almost a minute before responding. I might know someone who could help with materials, unofficial channels, for old time's sake, but you would need to handle transportation and construction. Yourself. Marcus felt relief wash over him. Roy understood the situation without needing details explained. That was the bond between soldiers who had served together in impossible situations. That would be perfect, Roy. I owe you one. You owe me several, but who is counting? I will be in touch with details. The communication ended and Marcus turned back to his friends. They were both staring at him with expressions of amazement and concern. You are really going to do this? Lisa asked. Build an indestructible mailbox using illegal military technology. Greg added. Marcus looked out the window again at the empty spot in his yard. The Zephyrians want to play games with rules and regulations, fine. But they are about to learn that humans do not give up when we are in the right. We find ways to make ourselves impossible to ignore. The real work was about to begin. Marcus waited 2 weeks before Roy contacted him again. The delay made him nervous, but he knew that acquiring experimental military technology took time and careful planning. Meanwhile, the HOA kept up their harassment campaign with daily flyovers and new violation notices for increasingly ridiculous infractions. They cited him for having grass that was too green for the neighborhood standards. Then they complained that his fence posts were spaced irregularly, even though he had measured each section 3 times. The fines were adding up quickly, and Marcus knew that was exactly what Kexathorian Prime wanted. Lisa and Greg stopped by every evening to help Marcus research quantum lock technology and study the HOA regulations. They had become an unofficial resistance cell working together to find a solution that none of them could manage alone. Lisa brought her knowledge of alien psychology, while Greg provided intelligence about HOA activities from his contacts in town. I talked to Captain Williams at the spaceport today, Greg said one evening while they worked on design plans. He says there have been 3 more cargo ships full of Zephyrian colonists in the past week. They are building a new settlement on the north side of the valley. Marcus looked up from his calculations. On whose land? Property that used to belong to the Henderson family before they got hit with violations and had to sell. Kexathorian Prime bought it at auction for about half what it was worth. The pattern was accelerating. The Zephyrians were not just harassing individual humans anymore. They were actively preparing to replace them with their own people. It made Marcus even more determined to succeed with his impossible mailbox project. Any word from your military friend? Lisa asked. Not yet, but Roy said it might take time to arrange things quietly. The kind of materials we need are not exactly available at the local hardware store. Marcus had been working on the technical design while waiting for supplies. The quantum lock system was complex but not impossible to build with the right materials. The trick was creating a structure that looked like an ordinary mailbox while hiding the advanced technology inside. He had also been studying the legal exemptions more carefully. Lisa was right about the communication device loophole, but there were other possibilities too. Structures that served security or defense purposes also had special protections under galactic law. If he could design a mailbox that qualified as both communication and security equipment, it would be much harder for the HOA to challenge. What if we made it a memorial too? Lisa suggested, looking at his sketches. There are special protections for monuments and memorials under galactic cultural preservation laws. Marcus considered the idea. A memorial to what? Human determination. The refusal to be pushed around by bureaucratic bullies, Greg said with a grin. Make it a monument to every human who ever stood up for what was right. The idea had merit. Memorial structures had very strong legal protections, and the cultural preservation laws were enforced by the Galactic Council, directly, not local authorities like Kexathorian Prime. It would add another layer of legal protection to the already impossible physical security. Marcus' communication system finally activated with an encrypted message from Roy. The text was brief and coded, but Marcus understood it perfectly. The materials would arrive in 3 days aboard a civilian cargo ship, making a routine supply run to New Montana. The package would be labeled as farming equipment and delivered to Greg's supply depot. Roy came through. Marcus announced to his friends. We get our materials in 3 days. Lisa looked excited and nervous at the same time. Are you sure this is going to work? The technology will work. I am sure of that. The question is whether we can build it and install it before the HOA figures out what we are doing. Greg stood up and started pacing around the room. How long do you think it will take to build? Marcus reviewed his plans and calculations. If we work straight through, maybe 2 days for construction and 1 day for installation. But we have to be careful about the quantum lock activation. Once we turn it on, there is no going back. The mailbox will be permanently fused to whatever surface we put it on, and if something goes wrong, then we will have created an immovable piece of junk that proves humans are crazy, but not necessarily smart. The next 3 days passed slowly. Marcus made final preparations while trying to act normally around any HOA surveillance drones. He ordered standard mailbox materials from Greg's store to make it look like he was planning another ordinary replacement. Meanwhile, Lisa worked on the legal research to make sure they had covered all the regulatory angles. Kex's Thorian Prime sent another violation notice complaining that Marcus' yard was too empty without a proper mailbox. The irony was not lost on Marcus that the same organization destroying his mailboxes was now demanding that he install a new one. It was psychological warfare designed to frustrate humans into giving up. The cargo ship arrived exactly on schedule, carrying supplies for various settlements across New Montana. Greg was waiting at the spaceport when it landed and supervised the unloading personally. The package labeled as agricultural soil enhancement equipment was actually a compact quantum lock generator, along with specialized materials designed to bond at the molecular level. This thing is heavier than it looks, Greg said as they carried the crate into Marcus' workshop. What exactly is in here? Marcus opened the container carefully and examined the contents. Roy had sent everything on the specifications list, plus a few extra components that might be useful. The quantum lock generator was about the size of a toolbox but packed with technology that cost more than most people made in a year. Quantum field manipulators, molecular bonding catalysts, and enough exotic matter to power the whole system. Marcus explained, lifting out each component. This stuff is normally used to build fortifications that can survive direct hits from antimatter weapons. Lisa picked up one of the smaller devices and turned it over in her hands. It looks so ordinary. The best military technology usually does. You do not want your enemies to know what they are facing until it is too late. Marcus spread out the construction plans and started organizing the components. We need to work fast and quietly. The HOA drones patrol this area every few hours, and we cannot afford to attract attention until the system is fully installed and activated. They worked through the night building what looked like an ordinary steel mailbox around an extraordinary technological core. The quantum lock generator was hidden inside the post while molecular bonding catalysts were mixed into the paint and mounting hardware. From the outside, it would appear to be exactly the same as every other mailbox Marcus had built. How do we test it without activating it permanently? Greg asked as they worked on the final assembly. We do not test it. Military engineering is about building systems that work the first time because you usually only get one chance. Marcus attached the last piece of the outer shell and stepped back to examine their work. Either the physics is right or it is not. Either we did the math correctly or we did not. Lisa ran her hand along the smooth surface of the mailbox. It looks so normal. That is the point. The Zephyrians need to believe it is just another standard human mailbox until they try to destroy it. Then they will learn that humans can build things that cannot be moved. Marcus sealed the final access panel and activated the internal systems. Lights flickered briefly inside the post, showing that the quantum field generator was warming up, but not yet engaged. Everything was ready for installation. Tomorrow morning we put this in the ground and find out if human engineering can beat Zephyrian bureaucracy, Marcus said, looking at his creation with pride and nervousness in equal measure. What if they bring bigger weapons? Lisa asked. Then they find out that quantum locks do not care how big your weapons are. The mailbox will be part of the planet itself. They would have to destroy New Montana to remove it. Greg laughed despite his nervousness. I would love to see Kex Thorian Prime try to explain that to his superiors. Marcus covered the mailbox with a tarp and checked the security systems in his workshop. Tomorrow would determine whether his plan was brilliant or crazy. Probably both. But that was exactly the kind of thinking that made humans so hard to defeat. The Zephyrians were about to meet human stubbornness backed by impossible technology. Marcus could hardly wait to see their reaction. Marcus woke up before dawn on installation day with his stomach full of nervous energy. Today would determine whether months of planning and preparation would result in victory or spectacular failure. He made coffee and checked the weather reports, while going over the installation procedure one more time in his mind. The forecast showed clear skies with light winds, perfect conditions for precision work. The HOA surveillance drones usually made their first patrol around 8 in the morning, which gave him about 3 hours to get the mailbox installed and activated before attracting attention. Lisa arrived just after sunrise carrying a thermos of coffee and a bag of breakfast sandwiches. She looked as nervous as Marcus felt, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Greg is bringing his truck and some digging equipment. He should be here in about an hour." Marcus nodded and led her out to the workshop where the finished mailbox waited, under its protective covering. In the early morning light, it looked even more ordinary than it had the night before. Just a simple steel post with a basic mailbox attached exactly like thousands of others across human space. "Hard to believe something so normal-looking could cause so much trouble," Lisa said, running her hand along the smooth surface. "The best solutions usually are simple ones. Complex technology hidden inside a basic design." Marcus lifted one end of the mailbox to test its weight. "Help me carry this out to the installation site." They moved the mailbox carefully to the exact spot where all the previous ones had been destroyed. Marcus had measured the location precisely to make sure it met every HOA regulation for placement height and distance from the road. He wanted no legitimate complaints when Kexthorian Prime eventually showed up. Greg arrived with his truck and a small excavator just as they finished positioning the mailbox. As the owner of the local supply depot, he had legitimate reasons to be driving heavy equipment around the valley, so his presence would not seem suspicious to any watching drones. "How deep do we need to dig?" Greg asked, climbing down from the excavator. Marcus consulted his plans. 4 feet down for the main post foundation plus another 2 feet for the quantum anchor points. The molecular bonding will extend from there into the bedrock. The digging went quickly with Greg operating the excavator while Marcus and Lisa prepared the quantum lock components. Everything had to be placed exactly according to the specifications or the molecular bonding would not form properly. There would be no second chances once the system activated. "Tell me again how this is supposed to work," Greg said as they lowered the mailbox into position. Marcus pointed to the hidden components built into the post structure. The quantum field generator creates a localized space where normal molecular bonds become elastic. The bonding catalysts then forge new connections between the mailbox materials and whatever they touch. Once the field collapses, those new bonds become permanent and unbreakable, and the mailbox becomes part of the planet itself. Exactly. The quantum locks will extend down into the bedrock and out into the surrounding soil. Removing the mailbox would require removing several tons of dirt and rock along with it. Lisa checked the alignment measurements one more time. "Everything looks perfect. Are you ready to activate it?" Marcus took a deep breath and looked around the valley where he had hoped to live peacefully. The Zephyrian settlements were visible in the distance, growing larger every week as more colonists arrived. This mailbox was about more than just mail delivery. It was about whether humans would have a place on New Montana or be driven off by bureaucratic harassment. "Let me make one final check of the legal documentation," Marcus said, pulling out his tablet. "If this works, we want to make sure we can defend it in court." He reviewed the memorial designation paperwork that Lisa had prepared. The mailbox was officially registered as a monument to human determination and perseverance with proper filings submitted to the Galactic Cultural Preservation Authority. The communication equipment exemption was also properly documented along with the security device classification. Everything is filed and registered. The HOA cannot claim this is an illegal installation. Greg wiped sweat from his forehead and looked toward the road. "Better hurry. I can see dust clouds from the direction of town, probably the morning patrol drones." Marcus activated his handheld controller and began the quantum lock sequence. The mailbox hummed softly as exotic energy fields formed around the buried components. Indicator lights flickered in a complex pattern showing that the molecular bonding process was beginning. "How long does it take?" Lisa asked, watching the lights. "About 30 seconds for full activation. Once those lights turn solid green, the process is irreversible." The humming sound grew louder and Marcus could feel vibrations in the ground around the mailbox. Somewhere several feet below the surface, quantum fields were rewriting the basic structure of matter to create bonds that had never existed before. 20 seconds. The lights continued their flickering pattern while the three humans stood watching, their impossible creation come to life. 25 seconds. The vibration stopped and the humming faded to a barely audible whisper. 30 seconds. All the lights turned solid green and the mailbox fell completely silent. "Is that it?" Greg asked Marcus, checked his controller display. Quantum lock is fully engaged. The mailbox is now molecularly bonded to approximately 8 cubic meters of soil bedrock and planetary crust. It would take antimatter explosives to remove it. Lisa laughed with relief and excitement. "We actually did it? Now comes the real test," Marcus said, pointing toward the approaching dust clouds. "The drones are coming and they are going to find a mailbox that looks exactly like all the others. They will try to destroy it just like before." The three friends quickly gathered their tools and equipment, making the installation site look as normal as possible. Greg drove his excavator back toward town, while Marcus and Lisa went inside to watch through the windows. The HOA surveillance drones arrived exactly on schedule. 3 small flying machines that scanned the property with various sensors before focusing on the new mailbox. Marcus could see them hovering around it, taking measurements and recording data. "They are probably comparing it to the regulations right now," Lisa said, watching through binoculars, looking for any excuse to issue another violation. The drones completed their inspection and flew away without taking any action. Marcus checked the time and made a note in his logbook. The morning patrol had found nothing wrong with his mailbox installation. Phase 1 complete, Marcus announced. Now we wait for them to try destroying it. That evening, Marcus received an official HOA notice citing his new mailbox for 17 different violations. The list included improper height, inadequate reflectivity, non-standard materials, and aesthetic disruption of community harmony. A demolition order was scheduled for the following morning. Marcus read the notice to Lisa and Greg over dinner. "Same charges as always. They are not even being creative anymore." "What time do they usually show up for demolition?" Greg asked. "Around 10 in the morning. The enforcement drones come first to scan for any changes. Then the heavy equipment arrives to do the actual destruction." Lisa looked nervous. "What if the quantum locks do not work? What if we made a mistake somewhere?" Marcus had been wondering the same thing, but he pushed the doubts away. "The technology is sound and we followed the procedures exactly. Either quantum physics works the way the textbooks say it does, or every scientist in the galaxy has been wrong for the past century. Those are not very comforting odds. They are the only odds we have. Besides, humans have always been good at making impossible things work through pure stubbornness." That night, Marcus barely slept. He kept going over the installation procedure in his mind, looking for anything they might have missed. The quantum lock generator had showed all green lights, and the bonding process had followed the predicted timeline. Everything indicated that the system was working properly, but he would not know for certain until the Zephyrians tried to destroy his mailbox and failed. Marcus was awake watching through his window when the enforcement drones arrived the next morning. 3 machines just like before, but this time they carried heavy cutting tools designed to slice through steel and concrete. They hovered around the mailbox for several minutes, taking detailed scans before beginning their attack. The first drone extended a plasma cutter and began working on the mailbox post. Marcus held his breath as the cutting beam made contact with the metal surface. Nothing happened. The plasma cutter, which had easily destroyed 4 previous mailboxes, made no impression on the quantum-locked structure. The drone adjusted its power settings and tried again with the same result. No damage, no progress, no effect at all. The second drone tried using a molecular disruptor which should have been able to break down any normal material. The beam struck the mailbox and simply dissipated without causing any visible effect. The third drone attempted to grab the mailbox with mechanical clamps and pull it out of the ground. The motors strained and whined, but the structure did not move, even a fraction of an inch. After 20 minutes of futile efforts, the drones retreated to report their failure to headquarters. Marcus watched them fly away and allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. Did it work? Lisa asked, running over. From her farm, Marcus walked outside and examined his mailbox carefully. News of the indestructible mailbox spread through the human settlements faster than Marcus had expected. By noon, Greg was fielding calls at his supply depot from farmers and ranchers across the valley who wanted to know how Marcus had built something the HOA could not destroy. Everyone is talking about it, Greg reported when he stopped by that evening. The word is that you have found a way to beat the Zephyrians at their own game. Marcus was not sure whether the attention was good or bad. I hope people understand that this was a one-time project. We cannot build quantum-locked mailboxes for everyone. Maybe not, but it shows that the HOA is not as powerful as they pretend to be. People are starting to hope again. Lisa arrived carrying a basket of vegetables from her garden and a worried expression. I have been monitoring Zephyrian communications all day. Kexthorian Prime is very upset about the failed demolition. He has called for a full investigation and requested heavy equipment from the regional office. What kind of heavy equipment? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Military-grade demolition tools, the kind used for breaking through fortified bunkers, plus a team of Zephyrian engineers to analyze why their standard weapons failed. Marcus had expected this escalation. No bureaucrat liked being embarrassed by a failure, and Kexthorian Prime had built his career on successful harassment campaigns against human settlers. One impossible mailbox was threatening his entire reputation. How long before they arrive? 2 days, maybe 3. The heavy equipment has to be transported from the regional capital. That gave Marcus time to prepare for the next phase of the conflict. He had built his mailbox to withstand anything the local HOA could bring, but military-grade weapons might present a different challenge, not because they could break the quantum locks, but because they might damage the surrounding area. We need to document everything, Marcus decided. If they start using military weapons against civilian property, we want evidence for the galactic courts. Greg pulled out his tablet and started making notes. I can set up recording equipment around the mailbox site. Multiple angles with high-resolution cameras. Good idea. We also need witnesses from off-world. People who cannot be intimidated by local threats. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. I have contacts at the University of Centauri who study alien bureaucratic systems. They would be very interested in observing this situation. Contact them tonight. The more official observers we have, the better. Marcus spent the next day reinforcing his legal position and preparing for what was sure to be an epic confrontation. He filed additional paperwork with the Galactic Cultural Preservation Authority, emphasizing the historical significance of his mailbox as a symbol of human determination. He also sent detailed reports to his old military contacts, describing the quantum lock technology and its successful deployment. If the Zephyrians escalated to military weapons, Marcus wanted the Earth Defense Force to know that human technology was being threatened by alien bureaucrats. The first sign of trouble came early on the second morning, when Lisa detected unusual, subspace communications from the direction of the HOA regional office. The signals were encrypted, but the volume and frequency suggested major operations being coordinated. They are definitely planning something big, Lisa reported over breakfast. The communication traffic is 10 times normal levels. Marcus looked out his window at the mailbox standing peacefully in the morning sunlight. It was hard to believe that such an ordinary-looking object could cause so much trouble for an entire alien government. Part of me hopes they give up and leave us alone, but I know they will not. Why are you so sure? Because this is not really about mailboxes anymore. It is about whether humans can resist Zephyrian control. If they let us win, here other human settlements will start fighting back too. Greg arrived around midday with news from town. 3 cargo ships landed at the spaceport this morning. Military markings from the HOA Regional Authority. They are bringing serious hardware. Marcus felt his stomach tighten with nervous anticipation. What kind of hardware? I could not get close enough to see everything, but the local dock workers are talking about plasma artillery and gravitational manipulators, equipment designed to level buildings, not mailboxes. They are going to try to scare us into backing down, Marcus realized. Show overwhelming force and hope we surrender before they have to actually use it. Lisa looked worried. What if they do use it? What if they decide to make an example of your property? Then they learn that quantum-locked structures do not care how much force you apply to them. Physics is physics regardless of how advanced your weapons are. That afternoon, Thorian Prime arrived in person aboard a heavily armored transport, surrounded by smaller escort vehicles. The convoy landed near the HOA regional office in town, then proceeded slowly toward Marcus Ranch. With obvious military precision, Marcus and his friends watched the approaching vehicles through binoculars from the safety of the house. The lead transport was twice the size of normal civilian vehicles and bristled with communication equipment and sensor arrays. "He is bringing quite a show," Greg observed, counting the escort vehicles. "Must be at least 20 vehicles in that convoy." "Classic intimidation tactics," Marcus replied. "Make yourself look so powerful that your enemy gives up without a fight." The convoy stopped about 100 meters from Marcus' mailbox and began deploying equipment. Soldiers in blue Zephyrian uniforms set up a command post while technicians unloaded scanning devices and analysis tools. Thorian Prime himself emerged from the lead transport and walked directly toward the mailbox. He was tall, even for a Zephyrian, with the characteristic blue skin and elongated limbs of his species. His uniform was covered with insignia, indicating high rank and political authority. Marcus decided it was time for a direct confrontation. "I'm going out there to talk to him, Shai." "You sure that is wise?" Lisa asked. "He came to my property. The least I can do is be polite and welcome him." Marcus walked out of his house and approached the Zephyrian commander with calm confidence. Years of military service had taught him that showing fear in front of enemy officers was always a mistake. "You must be Thorian Prime," Marcus said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Welcome to my ranch." The Zephyrian ignored the offered handshake and spoke in heavily accented but clear English. "You are Marcus Johnson, the individual responsible for this illegal structure." "I am Marcus Johnson, the owner of this property. The mailbox is completely legal under galactic regulations as filed with the appropriate authorities." Thorian Prime gestured toward the mailbox with obvious irritation. This structure violated 17 specific regulations of the homeowners association. Demolition was ordered and authorized. Demolition was attempted, Marcus corrected. "But as you can see, the structure remains intact. That situation will be corrected momentarily. I have brought equipment sufficient to remove any obstacle." Marcus looked at the military vehicles and heavy weapons being positioned around his property. "That is quite an impressive show of force for one mailbox. Are you sure it is necessary?" Human defiance of lawful authority cannot be tolerated. This incident will serve as an example to other settlers who might consider similar resistance. The Zephyrian commander walked over to examine the mailbox more closely, while his technicians ran detailed scans. Marcus could see them taking measurements and comparing data to their regulations database. "Interesting," Thorian Prime said after several minutes of investigation. "The structure appears to meet all dimensional and material specifications, yet our standard demolition tools produced no effect." "Perhaps your tools need maintenance," Marcus suggested innocently. The Zephyrian fixed him with a cold stare. "Human humor will not save your property from removal. I have brought weapons that can penetrate the armor of military battleships. Your mailbox will not survive the next hour." Marcus met the alien's stare calmly. "We shall see," Thorian Prime turned and walked back toward his command post where heavy weapons were being assembled and calibrated. Marcus returned to his house where Lisa and Greg waited anxiously. "How did it go?" Lisa asked. "About as expected. He is angry, embarrassed, and determined to prove that Zephyrian authority cannot be challenged by human technology." What happens next? Marcus looked out the window at the military preparation happening in his front yard. Now we find out whether quantum physics is stronger than alien pride. The real test of his impossible mailbox was about to begin. The Zephyrian assault on Marcus' mailbox began at exactly 2 p.m, with military precision that would have been impressive if it had not been directed against a simple piece of mail delivery equipment. Thorian Prime positioned himself at the command post, while his technicians prepared weapons designed to destroy fortified bunkers. Marcus watched from his house with Lisa and Greg plus 3 academic observers from the University of Centauri, who had arrived that morning. to document what they called a unique example of bureaucratic escalation. The professors seemed more excited than nervous about witnessing advanced alien weapons in action. First, they will try plasma artillery, Marcus predicted as the Zephyrians wheeled a large cannon into position, high-energy beam designed to melt through armor plating. The weapon charged with a rising whine that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Blue energy gathered at the cannon muzzle while targeting computers locked onto the mailbox. Kexithorian Prime gave the order, and a brilliant beam lanced across the 100 meters separating the weapon from its target. The plasma struck the mailbox with enough energy to vaporize a small building. Light flared so brightly that everyone had to shield their eyes while thunder rolled across the valley from superheated air, expanding explosively. When the light faded, the mailbox stood exactly where it had been before. No damage, no movement, no effect at all. The Zephyrian technicians checked their instruments and recalibrated the weapon. They fired again with the same result, then a third time with power settings increased to maximum. The mailbox absorbed energy, equivalent to a small nuclear explosion without showing so much as a scorch mark. Impossible, Kexithorian Prime declared loud enough for Marcus to hear across the distance. No material can withstand direct plasma bombardment at those energy levels. Quantum-locked structures can, Marcus said quietly to his friends. The molecular bonds we created are stronger than the forces holding atoms together. You would need to break down matter at the subatomic level to affect them. The Zephyrians brought up their second weapon, a gravitational manipulator that could generate localized gravity fields strong enough to crush starship hulls. The device looked like a large metal ring surrounded by exotic field generators that warped the air around them. This should be interesting, one of the Centauri professors said, adjusting his recording equipment. Gravitational weapons work by altering the basic structure of spacetime itself. The manipulator activated with a sound like reality tearing apart. Gravity around the mailbox increased to crushing levels that should have compressed the structure into a tiny ball of superdense matter. Marcus could see the effects as small rocks and debris were pulled toward the mailbox and flattened against the ground. But the mailbox itself remained unchanged. The quantum locks held the molecular structure, rigid regardless of how spacetime bent around it. After 5 minutes of maximum gravitational force, the Zephyrians shut down the weapon in obvious frustration. They are starting to panic, Lisa observed, watching the alien soldiers through binoculars. Look at their body language. She was right. The Zephyrians were moving with the jerky, agitated motions that their species displayed when faced with situations they could not understand or control. Several of them were clustering around Kexithorian Prime, gesturing emphatically at the unharmed mailbox. What weapons do they have left? Greg asked. Marcus consulted his notes about Zephyrian military technology. Molecular disruptors should be next. Those work by breaking down the bonds between atoms directly. The third weapon was smaller than the others, but surrounded by more warning signs and radiation barriers. The technicians operated it from behind. Heavy shielding while robotic systems handled the actual targeting and firing. This is the kind of weapon they use to dismantle asteroids for mining, Marcus explained. It literally takes matter apart one molecule at a time. The disruptor beam was invisible, but its effects on the surrounding area were obvious. Plants withered and died in a circle around the mailbox as their molecular structure was disrupted. The ground itself began breaking down into component elements, but again the mailbox remained untouched. The quantum-locked bonds were immune to molecular disruption because they existed at a deeper level of reality than ordinary chemical or physical forces. Outstanding, exclaimed Professor Kane from the University of Centauri. This is the first documented case of quantum lock technology resisting directed molecular bombardment. Kexithorian Prime was no longer trying to hide his frustration. He marched over to the weapon's position and began shouting orders in the Zephyrian language while pointing dramatically at the offending mailbox. His subordinates responded by bringing up their most powerful weapon yet, antimatter projector. Marcus identified the final device as it rolled into position. That is serious military hardware designed for breaking through planetary defense shields. Even the academic observers looked nervous as the Zephyrians assembled the antimatter weapon. The device required multiple safety systems and radiation shielding just to operate safely. A direct hit from antimatter could theoretically destroy anything made of normal matter. Are you sure the quantum locks can handle antimatter? Lisa asked, with obvious worry. Marcus reviewed the theoretical calculations in his head. Antimatter works by annihilating normal matter on contact, releasing enormous amounts of energy. But quantum-locked matter is not exactly normal anymore. The molecular bonds exist in a state that should be immune to antimatter interaction. Should be. Physics says it will work. But this is the first real-world test. The antimatter projector charged with a deep harmonic vibration that seemed to resonate in everyone's bones. Warning lights flashed as exotic particles were accelerated to incredible velocities and focused into a beam of pure annihilation. Kex Thorian Prime personally gave the order to fire. The antimatter beam struck the mailbox with the force of a falling star. Energy release was so massive that everyone had to take cover behind radiation shielding, while the very air around the target area ionized and glowed with released radiation. For 30 seconds, the beam poured antimatter energy onto the mailbox, while instruments recorded radiation levels that should have sterilized everything within a kilometer radius. Then the weapon shut down, as its power cells were exhausted. When the radiation cleared enough for observation, the mailbox stood exactly where it had been before, not only undamaged but completely unaffected by direct antimatter bombardment that could have carved through a mountain. The silence from the Zephyrian position was complete and profound. Marcus stood up from behind his radiation shelter and looked across the devastated landscape toward Kex Thorian Prime. The area around the mailbox looked like the surface of an alien moon, with all vegetation and topsoil stripped away by repeated weapons fire. But the mailbox itself remained pristine and untouched in the center of the destruction. I believe that concludes your demonstration, Marcus called out politely. Would you like to examine the mailbox more closely? Kex Thorian Prime walked slowly across the ruined ground, looking like a leader whose entire worldview had just collapsed. He approached the mailbox cautiously as if it might suddenly attack him, and ran his long blue fingers over the smooth, undamaged surface. What kind of technology is this? He asked in a voice that had lost all its previous authority. Human engineering, Marcus replied simply. We build things to last. The Zephyrian commander stared at the mailbox for several long minutes before turning to face Marcus directly. This structure cannot be removed by any weapon in our arsenal. That was the idea. But this is impossible according to all known physics, Marcus smiled. Maybe you do not know all the physics yet. Kex Thorian Prime looked around at his expensive weapons and elite soldiers, all defeated by a simple mailbox that delivered mail. His career was probably over, and his species' confidence in their technological superiority had been shattered by human ingenuity. What do you want? He asked finally. To be left alone to live peacefully on my own property without harassment from bureaucratic bullies, Marcus answered. Same thing every human wants. The Zephyrian nodded slowly as if finally understanding something that had been obvious to everyone else. The harassment will stop. All harassment. Of all human settlers on New Montana, another nod. All harassment, Kex Thorian. Prime walked back to his command post and began issuing orders for withdrawal. Within an hour, the entire military force had packed up and departed, leaving only Marcus' mailbox standing in the center of a circle of devastation. We won, Lisa said with amazement in her voice. We won. Marcus agreed, looking at his impossible creation with pride and satisfaction. The first battle was over, but the war for human dignity had just begun. News of the failed Zephyrian assault spread across the galaxy faster than Marcus had thought possible. Within days, his mailbox had become famous as the structure that could not be destroyed by any known weapon. Communication requests poured in, from news services, research institutions, and government agencies, all wanting to know how one human farmer had built something that defeated advanced alien military technology. The University of Centauri wants to send a full research team. Lisa reported, reading through the morning messages. So does the Earth Defense Force, the Andromedan Science Council, and about 12 different news organizations. Marcus looked out his window at the mailbox standing peacefully in its circle of devastation. The contrast was almost artistic, with pristine human engineering surrounded by the evidence of Zephyrian military fury. Several small spacecraft were already orbiting overhead, taking detailed scans and photographs. "What about the other human settlements?" Marcus asked. "Have they heard from the HOA?" Greg, who had been monitoring communications from town, nodded enthusiastically. Kexthorian Prime sent out official orders canceling all pending violations against human properties. No more harassment, no more impossible. Regulations, no more forced sales. And the Zephyrians are actually following those orders. So far, yes, but I think they are more confused than anything else. Their entire system was based on technological superiority, and we just proved that humans can build things they cannot destroy. The first research team arrived that afternoon from the nearby Centauri colonies. Professor Kane returned with additional scientists carrying advanced scanning equipment designed to analyze quantum structures. They set up a temporary laboratory in Marcus Yard and began detailed studies of the impossible mailbox. "Fascinating," Professor Kane declared after several hours of analysis. "The quantum lock bonds extend approximately 8 meters into the planetary crust, creating a molecular fusion between artificial materials and natural rock formations." Marcus watched the scientists work with mixed feelings of pride and concern. "I hope you understand that this technology cannot be mass-produced. The materials alone cost more than most people make in a lifetime." "Of course, but the theoretical implications are extraordinary. You have demonstrated that matter can be locked into quantum states that resist all known forms of energy application." Lisa joined the conversation, carrying refreshments for the research team. "What does that mean in practical terms?" "It means that humans have discovered a new form of physics," Professor Kane explained excitedly. "Quantum-locked structures could revolutionize everything from architecture to starship construction." Marcus was not sure he wanted to revolutionize anything. He had just wanted to check his mail without having it destroyed by alien bureaucrats. But he was beginning to understand that his simple solution had implications far beyond his original problem. The second major development came 3 days later, when Roy Bennett arrived aboard a military transport accompanied by a full Earth Defense Force technical team. Roy looked older than Marcus remembered, but his enthusiasm for impossible engineering projects had not diminished. "You magnificent crazy human," Roy said, embracing his old friend. "Do you have any idea what you have accomplished here?" "I built a mailbox that works. You built a structure that is immune to antimatter bombardment using technology that officially does not exist. The military applications alone could change the balance of power across the entire galaxy." Marcus led Roy over to examine the mailbox while the EDF technicians began setting up their own scanning equipment. "The technology came from EDF research programs. I just applied it to a civilian problem. Applied it brilliantly. We have been trying to develop practical quantum lock systems for years, but could never solve the power requirements and stability issues." "What made the difference?" Roy ran his scanner over the mailbox post and whistled softly at the readings. "You did not try to make it portable or reversible. Military engineers always want systems that can be deployed and redeployed as needed. But you built something permanent, something that was meant to stay in one place forever. Because that is what I needed. A mailbox that could not be moved or destroyed." "Exactly. Sometimes the best solutions come from accepting limitations instead of trying to overcome them." The EDF team spent a week studying the quantum lock technology, while additional researchers arrived from across human space. Marcus found himself hosting an impromptu scientific conference in his front yard, with experts in quantum physics, materials science, and alien psychology, all trying to understand the implications of his achievement. But the most important visitor arrived without fanfare or advance warning. Marcus first noticed the small ship landing near his house early one morning while he was having coffee on his porch. The vessel was sleek and elegant, with design features he did not recognize. An alien emerged from the ship, but not a Zephyrian. This being was shorter and stockier, with gray skin and large dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The creature approached Marcus' house slowly with obvious caution. "You are Marcus Johnson, the builder of the structure that cannot be destroyed," the alien said in perfect English. "I am Marcus Johnson." "And you are?" "I am called Vex. I represent the Galactic Council Security Authority." Marcus felt his stomach tighten with sudden worry. The Galactic Council was the highest authority in known space with power to make decisions that affected entire star systems. If they were getting involved, the situation had escalated far beyond a simple property dispute. What can I do for you, Vex? The Council has received reports of a human settlement using unknown technology to resist lawful authority. These reports have caused considerable concern among member species. Marcus gestured toward the mailbox standing in its circle of devastation. As you can see, the technology exists and it works, but it was used purely for defensive purposes against bureaucratic harassment. Vex approached the mailbox and began examining it with handheld instruments. The Zephyrian delegation claims this structure violates multiple galactic treaties regarding the deployment of advanced weapon systems by civilian populations. It is a mailbox, not a weapon system. A mailbox that cannot be destroyed by military-grade antimatter weapons. The distinction may be less clear than you believe. Marcus realized he was facing a new kind of threat. The Zephyrians had failed to destroy his mailbox by force, so now they were trying to use galactic law to declare it illegal. If the Council ruled against him, he could face charges that would affect all human settlements. May I ask what your personal assessment is? Marcus said carefully. Vex completed his scan and looked directly at Marcus with those large, dark eyes. My assessment is that you built exactly what you claim to have built. A delivery system for postal communications that happens to be immune to destruction. The question is whether such immunity constitutes a threat to galactic stability. Do you believe it does? The alien was quiet for a long moment before answering. I believe that any species capable of building structures that resist all known weapons while maintaining they are purely civilian in nature is a species that should be approached with considerable respect. Marcus felt relief wash over him. So, the Council will not order the structure removed. The Council will likely be very interested in establishing formal diplomatic relations with whoever can provide quantum lock technology for defensive applications. Vex replied with what might have been a smile. The galaxy is full of species who would pay considerable sums for structures that cannot be destroyed by their enemies. You mean this could become a business, Marcus Johnson? I believe you are about to become a very wealthy and influential human as Vex returned to his ship. Marcus looked around at the scientists and researchers studying his impossible mailbox. What had started as a simple desire to receive mail without harassment was turning into something that could change the entire relationship between humans and the rest of the galaxy. Roy Bennett walked over and put his hand on Marcus' shoulder. Still think you just built a mailbox? Marcus watched Vex ship disappear into the morning sky, carrying news of human quantum lock technology back to the Galactic Council. I think I might have accidentally started a revolution. The best kind of revolution. The kind that begins with one person refusing to back down when they are in the right. Marcus nodded and walked over to check his mail. The box was full of messages from across the galaxy, all wanting to know how humans had learned to build the impossible. He was going to need a bigger mailbox. 6 months after the Great Mailbox Battle, Marcus found himself running the most unusual manufacturing operation in the galaxy. What had started as a single act of defiance against bureaucratic harassment had evolved into a thriving business producing quantum-locked structures for clients across known space. The workshop behind his house had been expanded 3 times to accommodate the specialized equipment needed for quantum lock production. Roy Bennett had taken early retirement from the Earth Defense Force to become Marcus' partner in what they called Unbreakable Solutions Incorporated. We have orders for 50 more fence posts from the Andromedan agricultural colonies, Lisa reported, during their weekly business meeting. She had become the company communications director after discovering she had a talent for negotiating with alien customers. Plus, the Centauri government wants quantum-locked foundations for their new embassy buildings. Marcus looked up from the technical specifications he was reviewing. Can we handle that much production? If we hire 10 more technicians and expand the workshop again, Roy answered. The demand is incredible. Everyone wants structures that cannot be destroyed by their enemies. Greg, who now managed the supply chain from his expanded depot in town, added his own report. Material costs are going up, but profits are still enormous. We are charging enough to make each project worthwhile while keeping prices reasonable for legitimate defense applications. The success was gratifying, but Marcus sometimes missed the simple days when his biggest problem was getting his mail delivered without interference. Now he was dealing with production schedules, shipping logistics, and customer service issues that spanned multiple star systems. "What about the Zephyrians?" Marcus asked. "Any word from their new management?" Kexthorian Prime was reassigned to a position monitoring asteroid mining operations in an uninhabited system, Lisa replied with obvious satisfaction. His replacement is much more reasonable about property regulations. No harassment of human settlers for the past 6 months. The defeat of the Zephyrian harassment campaign had been complete and permanent. Word had spread through alien bureaucratic circles that humans possessed technology that made traditional intimidation tactics useless. Several other species had quietly abandoned their own harassment campaigns against human settlements. The real success story is what happened to the other human colonies, Roy said, consulting his tablet. Requests for quantum-locked mailboxes and property markers have come from 47 different worlds where humans were facing similar bureaucratic pressure. Marcus nodded with satisfaction. That was always the real goal. Making sure humans could live peacefully on their own property without being pushed around by alien officials. The first quantum-locked mailbox had become a tourist attraction, drawing visitors from across the galaxy who wanted to see the structure that had defeated advanced military weapons. Marcus had been forced to install a small visitor center in his front yard to manage the crowds. Professor Kane from the University of Centauri had established a permanent research station to study the long-term effects of quantum lock technology. His team published regular papers documenting how the molecular bonds remained stable over time and continued to resist all attempts at damage or removal. "Any interesting research results this week?" Marcus asked. "Professor Kane says the quantum locks are actually getting stronger as they age," Lisa reported. "Something about the bonds becoming more integrated with the planetary structure over time. So the mailbox is becoming more permanent, not less. Apparently, it will eventually be fused with the planet at the subatomic level. In a few thousand years, removing it would require destroying the entire world." Marcus grinned at the thought of his simple mailbox outlasting civilizations and surviving the rise and fall of galactic empires. "I like the idea of something humans built being that permanent." The business had also attracted attention from the Earth government and military leadership. Marcus had received several official visits from high-ranking officials who wanted to understand the strategic implications of quantum lock technology. "The Earth Defense Force is offering us a massive contract for quantum-locked military fortifications," Roy reported. "Enough money to retire comfortably and leave the business to our children." "What did you tell them?" "That we would consider it after we finish filling civilian orders from human settlements that need protection from bureaucratic harassment." Marcus appreciated Roy's loyalty to their original mission. "How long will that take?" "At current production rates, about 5 years. By then we should have every human settlement in the galaxy protected by at least one quantum-locked structure." The transformation of human galactic status had been remarkable. Species that had previously ignored or dismissed human capabilities now approached them with respect and caution. The knowledge that humans could build structures immune to any known weapon had fundamentally changed diplomatic relationships. Vex, from the Galactic Council Security Authority, had become a regular customer, ordering quantum-locked communication stations for council facilities across the galaxy. He had also become something of a friend, visiting Marcus Ranch whenever business brought him to New Montana. "The council is considering new regulations about quantum lock technology," Vex reported during his latest visit. "Nothing restrictive, just guidelines to prevent misuse by aggressive species." Marcus served coffee on his porch while they discussed galactic politics. "What kind of misuse are they worried about?" "Primarily the construction of quantum-locked weapons platforms or fortifications designed for offensive rather than defensive purposes." "That makes sense. We never intended this technology to be used for aggression, which is why the regulations will specifically exempt human producers. The Council recognizes that your species has used quantum locks exclusively for legitimate defensive applications." Marcus looked out at his mailbox, standing peacefully in its circle of new grass that had finally grown back over the devastated ground. Hard to believe all this started because I wanted to receive mail without having it destroyed. The best revolutions often begin with simple desires for basic dignity and respect, Vex replied. Your refusal to accept bureaucratic harassment has changed the balance of power across the entire galaxy. As the sun set over New Montana, Marcus reflected on the unexpected turn his retirement had taken. He had come to this world seeking peace and quiet, but had instead become the center of a technological revolution that was reshaping interstellar relations. Lisa and Greg joined them on the porch, along with Roy and several of the research team, members who had become extended family over the past months. They sat together watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, while the quantum-locked mailbox stood guard over their small piece of human territory. What do you think happens next? Lisa asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. I think humans continue doing what we have always done. We build things that work. We stand up for what is right, and we refuse to back down when bullies try to push us around. Even when those bullies have advanced alien technology. Especially then. Human stubbornness combined with good engineering can overcome any challenge. Roy raised his coffee cup in a toast. To human engineering and alien frustration. To unbreakable mailboxes and the refusal to give up. Greg added, to the day when every human settlement has at least one structure that cannot be destroyed. Lisa contributed. Marcus stood and raised his own cup toward the mailbox that had started it all. To the simple idea that everyone deserves to receive their mail in peace. They drank to their success while the first quantum-locked structure in galactic history stood quietly in the darkness delivering mail and proving that humans could build things that lasted forever. The mailbox had become more than just a delivery system or a symbol of resistance. It was proof that human determination backed by impossible technology could change the galaxy itself. Marcus checked his mail one final time before going inside. The box was full of orders for more quantum-locked structures from human settlements, across the stars, all wanting their own unbreakable monuments to the refusal to surrender. He smiled and closed the mailbox door, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove that humans were not easily pushed around. The war for dignity had been won, but the work of building a better galaxy was just beginning, and it all started with one mailbox that nobody could destroy.